to your 10-point summary.
Yeah, but
Okay, yeah, I was this afternoon. I didn't get a chance to look at it.
but Dave, you're gonna. In my view, we should say the issue. Okay, that's fine. I just don't want to exclude you, but if you're fine if you're doing the summary, that's fine.
More than talk today.
Well, now it's your turn. Great, thank you. Now that you're asking all the time.
You're gonna need to talk pretty fast tonight.
I'm just milking a cow, actually. That's why it's called Rudy. We milk a cow every Friday.
You said you have a cow.
We got a cow share. It's actually pretty cool. It's, so, yeah, she's. No, she is the scripting. I do the, yeah. And I grab it. McKay, you're gonna be well behaved, right? All right. I'm glad. Yeah, I lost the debate.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Friday. It's good to be with you. We are pleased to welcome you, our live audience, and those joining us remotely on the live stream to another Constitution Literacy series this year. We're confident that you'll have an educational experience, and we're excited to engage with you this evening. We will first begin our event with an invocation offered by Carter Lawyer, after which Gabe Harmon will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Dear Heavenly Father, we're for this day, grateful that we can be here, and please let this debate will go good, that we can know what to say, and please let we can have a safe driver walk home when we're done and say these things in Christ, amen.
honor of one nation under God, please stand. Please recite the Pledge of Allegiance with me. Ready, begin.
Thank you, Gabe and Carter. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists for this evening. David Hancock is a member of the AHS High School faculty. Prior to joining American Heritage School, he is a cum laude graduate of BYU Law School and has argued dozens of constitutional issues in court. Jeff Hymas joined the American Heritage faculty in 2016 after working with many organizations, presenting hundreds of constitution education lectures to live audiences across America. He holds an MBA from Idaho State University and is a magna cum laude graduate of the BYU Marriott School of Management. My name is Adam Brewer, and I joined the American Heritage faculty in 2021. I also serve as an adjunct professor for the history department at BYU. I have a degree in doctoral degree in political science and have published in the policy realm and taught in that prior to coming to AHS. I will be serving as the moderator this evening. As many of you are probably aware, tonight is the last time we'll have Mr. Hymas with us as he departs on another endeavor with his family to Idaho. Jeff doesn't know that we're planning, David and I, to give him a little tribute this evening. So
An ambush?
We're gonna embarrass. Just take a few moments to embarrass him before we get into our debate. I will go first with a few thoughts, and then David will share a few thoughts as well. Jeff, these are some thoughts that I wrote down about you. I've enjoyed getting to know Mr. Hymas the last few years. There's a lot that I admire about you, Jeff, but just to name a few. Number one, I am impressed by your devotion to the Lord and to your family. It's clear that you have the light of Christ emblazoned on your countenance and that you value your testimony. When my kids get to the age of your kids in a few years, I hope to emulate your approach and example of being a devoted father of teenagers. Secondly, you have a humble grace about you. You share your thoughts with humility and acknowledge that there are other ways of seeing an issue. I admire that significantly, that you're so diplomatic and kind in your approach to others. And finally, it's obvious you love making an impact wherever you are serving. Whether it's your colleagues in the history department, students, or AHS as a whole, you're constantly thinking of new ways to elevate learning, improve skills, and simplify. This constant drive you have is commendable and something that I greatly admire about you. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thanks, Adam.
How long have you been at American Heritage? 7 years now?
7 years, yeah.
7 years. So about 7.5 years ago, I learned that Jeff was going to come work at American Heritage. And I heard that he was this constitutional expert. And I was just going, oh, great, that's what we need here is a good constitutional expert. So I went onto the internet and I looked him up before it even got here. And I found his videos and I watched all of his videos. And I was just thinking, oh, I can't believe this guy is coming here. And so he came, he's teaching, and I'm just thinking, oh, what's he telling those kids? I just don't know. But, you know, over the course of the next couple years, I got to know him mostly through our students because he was in a different part of the hallway than I was. I didn't run into him very much. But the more I got to talking with him, the more I found out that, first off, he's mostly not crazy. Still a little bit crazy, mostly not crazy, but more importantly, he was willing to listen and to ask questions. Two, I think, of the most important things that a person can have is the ability to listen and to ask questions. And he was very thoughtful. And surprising to me, the more I talked with him, the more I agreed with him. And not completely. So this debate is still going to happen, but I began to find myself shifting towards him on some issues. And it was something that I learned to really respect him and to really just look forward to the times when I would get to sit down with him, where the point came that he and I could sit down and we would talk about the details of something regarding Constitution or government policy for hours. Just really getting into the nitty-gritty. I have learned, however, that Mr. Hymas does not know his Constitution very well. Okay? In fact, I suspect that he's been using the wrong version of the Constitution all these years. So what I did, Jeff, is I went home today and I made you a Constitution. Hand that over to Jeff. So, so this is the right Constitution. So,
Perfect. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. Why is there a hammer and sickle on the front?
no. There's just one red star.
Just one red star.
Maybe it's
Thank
a
you.
black Bible or something.
Anyway, I'm going to miss him a ton. I've been sharing a classroom with him for the last year, and, it's really been great. He is a wonderful person, and we're going to miss him a lot.
Thank
Let's
you.
give Jeff a round of applause.
You're going to need that tonight. Make sure you get the language right.
Tonight we are taking, as you can tell, we're taking a new approach. In previous sessions of this, we've done a presentation on a given topic. However, we decided collectively to make tonight a little bit more unpredictable by fielding questions from students about anything current issues related or Constitution related. And so these questions, Mr. Hymas and Mr. Hancock haven't seen most of them. They don't know what to expect. I've compiled this list of questions and have placed the hardest ones on the top of my list. So before we get to our debate portion, I wanted to turn some time over to Jeff so that he could provide just a quick summary of what we have discussed over the last 2 years in these Constitution literacy debate sessions. Just so for those of you that are new who haven't come to these, kind of know where both of them stand on various issues, which will provide a good context for when we jump into some of the more intense debate topics that we're going to get to tonight. Jeff.
Yeah, thanks. So thanks for your comments and your applause and everything. That was really nice of you guys. So we've had 10 debates. This is our 11th debate over the last 2 years. And what I wanted to do, we thought would be nice, is to just kind of get the gears going here, warming up the thoughts, is kind of go through, whoa, what did I do? There we are. Talk about the issues and just give you the 5-second version of what I think about that issue and then the 5-second version of what Mr. Hancock thinks about it. And really, as we've talked about this over and over and over, almost all these topics come down to the same issue. The same issue is a difference of opinion on some really basic philosophical ideas. I'm a natural law guy. I feel that if you look at things for how they are and don't let people get involved, don't let people get in and manipulate or control the environment, that natural law will serve to make for a limited government, and it'll govern how things work. So kind of a hands-off, limited government approach. Mr. Hancock has a social contract theory approach, and it is more of a, let's put this in the hands of those who govern, and they get to decide what they want to do because they're elected by the people. And it lends itself more to an expansive government role in these issues. Okay, so in general, I think that's how we see it. I'm more limited view, natural law. Mr. Hancock is more social contract, more expansive view. Okay, so when it comes to money, I see these are very, very short. I mean, this is a 5-second summary of an hour and a half lecture or debate we've had on each one of these. I'm on the side of coin means coin, like gold and silver coin, and I'm against inflation. Mr. Hancock's on the side of coin means make money, and inflation is fine. Inflation is what we need to kind of manage the economy or manage the monetary system. In terms of economics, I have a very limited role of government approach. I think that, government needs to get out of the economy. They need to protect contracts and protect natural rights, but not do anything else. Mr. Hancock feels like government should play an important role in making the economy run smoothly and kind of fixing and making sure it runs the way it needs to run when the market fails, more or less. In terms of education, I'm way parent-centric. I'm all for the idea of private education. I think that a free market will solve the problems that education and the challenges that are in education. And Mr. Hancock is pro-public and kind of focused on the idea that we need to provide a system around supporting or even kind of guiding parents to how they should teach their kids.
Oh, I don't know. I'd say guiding, but the government, if it's gonna provide the education, it should have the ability to decide what's taught.
Yeah, not parents necessarily.
Yeah,
to some degree. So if you want to know what we're really saying, go back to all of our debates are logged and archived in constitutionandcivility.org. If you have questions, you can watch an hour and a half of that and find out what we really mean by that.
We are going to get to David's distrust of parents here in a second. So
It's not distrust.
stay tuned.
Stay tuned. War. This is where we kind of switch sides. I'm pretty liberal when it comes to war. I'm basically anti-war. Period. America shouldn't police the world. And Dave's more of the right side in this, more of a war hawk, where it is necessary for stability in the world to have kind of U.S. intervention. In terms of the General Welfare Clause, Supremacy Clause, Necessary and Proper Clause, we had individual debates about each one of those, but I think we can sum it up by saying I consider the constitutional language in those clauses to be restricting, to be limiting, to say, no, here's a few things you can do and that's it. That's the whole point of the Constitution. Dave sees it more as these clauses grant expanded power. They're enabling clauses to help the government do all the things they need to do to help the country run right. Supreme Court, we differ a ton on the Supreme Court. I love the idea that the court offers their opinion, but I think in the end it's Congress who gets to decide what the law means, not the Supreme Court. And Dave feels the opposite. The court essentially decides what the Constitution means. The Constitution can say whatever it wants to say, but it only means what the Supreme Court says it means. Anything you want to add there?
No.
Okay. Gun control. There's definitely some nuance here, but I'm just going to say it in a simple way. I'm against gun control, and Mr. Hancock's for gun control. There's a lot more nuance, but like I said, we'll get. I think that's. Yeah. So what we did is I placed these up on the board of all my classes, and so Mr. Hancock, and we fielded a whole bunch of questions. We're just trying to kind of prime the pump here. Lastly, property rights is one of the ones we did as well. I am under the kind of the natural law idea that government should only take property when it's necessary, like it has to happen for public use. And Mr. Hancock's more of a government can do what it needs to with property as it pleases under certain conditions outlined in the Constitution. So that's a quick summary, 3-minute summary of 10 hour-and-a-half debates.
Very good. Thank you, Jeff. Before we jump into our questions, I just want to make note, since we will be talking about sensitive topics, just that the views espoused by the panelists this evening are their own and in no way reflect the views of AHS as an organization. With that, let's jump into our first student question. I think one of the most questions that I received from note cards was how both of you view transgenderism and other issues related to LGBTQ+. Do you think concepts such as gender theory, the idea that gender is not a binary, or modern views about sexuality, such as people should explore their sexuality outside of traditional heterosexuality, should be taught to young children in the school setting? Then the same question for the family setting. David, would you like to start?
Oh, you're going to have me start, huh?
Yeah.
This is one I think is a hard question. I think that parents should be allowed to make certain decisions as to what it is that their children should learn. At the same time, I think that schools and school districts should also be able to decide what it is that they teach. I do believe in kind of a free market concept of education. I think that government has an obligation and a responsibility to provide education. And so long as they are providing that education, then with the assistance of their representatives, they have the responsibility to decide what is going to be taught. And so I think this comes down to me, this basically, I think, comes down to that social contract theory, is if the people want something to be taught, then that's what's taught. And parents have the ability to choose to step away, to come to a school like this, a private school, where they can receive the kind of instruction that they want. As a fundamental basis, I disagree with a lot of the conversations and arguments regarding transgenderism and things of that nature. I fully support and believe in the proclamation on the family, and think that is absolutely true with a capital T. But there's a lot of things that are not necessarily true with a capital T that get taught, and it's up to society to decide what those things are. And so, I mean, we can talk all day long about various kinds of theories and processes that have been discussed in education, and that's kind of what is the cost of public education. If people don't want that, then they need to take either education into their own hands and homeschool, or to do a private school. But I do believe that public education is something that is necessary.
Thanks, David. Jeff?
Well, this isn't a question that came up before, so we haven't had a chance to discuss if we disagree a lot on this. But I guess if it goes back to education, because I'm into private education and very parent-centric, then I think the parent should be the one making the decisions about that. Now, when you're in a public school, and I think as David said, as a parent, they can take their kid out of public school and put them in private school or homeschool them, and so they have that option. But some people feel like that's not necessarily a legitimate option due to finances or just, both parents work or whatever it is. And so, although I think that public system kind of has its place, like I don't really like that, but it is what it is. It's water way under the bridge. We have a public system. I think that there should be some answering to the parents first and foremost. So when I get school district boards or state boards of education, I'm not so interested or so supportive of the idea that they get to decide. I'm way more supportive of the idea that parents get to decide. And I think by nature, it's a religious question, I think. I think it's a very religious question, and how much should religion be involved in public schools? And I think you just have to think about some things. They have to be considered that if you ban religion, then you're teaching a religion. That religion is atheism. If you ban religion, you are choosing a religious standpoint. And I think that needs to be published quite a bit. That idea needs to be promoted. And so, I'm getting way off in the weeds here, but the First Amendment, it talks about protecting the freedom of religion, exercising your religion. You don't need protection from the government to exercise religion in your home or in your chosen church. Where you need protection from the government to act against you and prevent others from acting against you is in the public square. So I think the freedom of religion is the freedom to act on your religious beliefs in the public square, not to demand or command. I think it's totally inappropriate for a teacher to say this is what sect or this is what religion you must believe in or agree in if you're at a public school. But I think it's equally as inappropriate to say we can't say the word God or even imagine that there might be a God out there, because that in itself is endorsing atheism. So that's a little bit off the rails, I think. But anyway, that's kind of if you could fit the LGBTQIA issues into that, I think that's where I'd stand.
There's a similar question that we received from a couple of students about what the role of parents is in public education and how much of a say they should have on the curriculum in the public schools. So in relation to this last question, are you essentially suggesting that parents should be incredibly active in that, in the creation of curriculum and what is allowed to be taught? I think that's perhaps a line of agreement that you both have in this case.
Yep. Oh.
Well, yeah, sort of. I think that there are nuanced positions here, and in our debate on the Utah bill regarding the funding of private educations, we talked about this quite a bit, and my position, I think, on that is different than Jeff's. So I think that with a public education comes a certain burden. If you avail yourselves of a public education, every parent doesn't get the ability to say, we're going to learn that and we're not going to learn that. A public system just cannot work under those kinds of circumstances. You can't have individual parents making those kinds of decisions with regard to a public education system and have it be effective and have it work. As a result of that, in my view, the way that parents are able to engage in that is, first off and foremost, is they're involved in their children's lives. But secondly, it's through the voting process. It's through their election. It's through the representative process in our Republican form of government. Once they have elected those representatives, it's the representatives who then make those kinds of decisions and make those kinds of policy decisions. And I think that there is then a limited opportunity for parents at that point to either go forward or to pull away or to walk away from that. I think Jeff might have a little bit of a different position on that.
Yeah, I think this is where you can see the difference between social contract and natural law. In my view, natural law says it's a God-given, endowed power and responsibility of parents to teach their kids. And so parents are in charge of that. And I would agree that we live in a republic, and you essentially delegate as a parent to a teacher, to a school board in a public school, your right, the power associated with that. You don't delegate the right, you still maintain the right, but you delegate the power associated with educating your child when you put them in a public school. But I think it's really, really important, and that's why that they need to be answerable. The school board, I think, can be as local as possible. I love having school boards as very, very local as possible, so they're answering to the parent. And they can take that issue and resolve it at a very close level. Because if the systems how they are in public schools, the way I see it at least, is a lot of these school boards aren't necessarily looking to the parent at all. They're actually looking towards state board of education. They're looking toward federal funding. They're looking toward federal programs, and they're not actually looking towards the parent. I think it is messy. I think it'd be super messy to have have parents calling the shots. And I love that. I think freedom should be messy, and I think parents should call the shots. And I think government should go to those who show up. If the people who want certain things to be taught in class show up and stand for it and make it happen, then that should happen. And I love the idea of different school districts teaching stuff different ways. I think it's the same idea behind America, 50 states doing things different ways, and we can see which one works the best. Instead of having a centralized system, a centralized government saying this works the best, and everyone has to do it, they need to pull back and say, it's not our choice. Go to your local school board. They'll figure it out, and they'll decide. And if it works better or works worse, you can move. You can try to change whatever you want to do, but it ends up being more of a free for all. I mean, it is a little bit messy. I like the idea of messiness. I think I think best practices rise to the surface in the face of free ability to choose how to run things.
So just as a follow-up question, Jeff, so would you then be opposed to efforts in more right-wing Republican states like in Florida that actually at the state legislative level ban like the teaching of CRT or gender theory in the classroom?
Well, I think if I'm going to be true to my statement, then yes, I'd be against the state deciding that. I think they should decide that at the local school board level. And I think even though that's messy, even though goes against my morals and my desires, what I think is best for all the kids in Florida, if I lived in Florida, I'm not in charge of all the kids in Florida. I'm in charge of my kids, and we can go to a school board and we can fix that. Or if we don't fix it, then I move to somewhere like Utah or Idaho where they don't do that kind of stuff. But I think the principle behind federalism, never delegate to a higher level of government that which can be solved at a lower level. And can the teaching of your kids be solved at a very low level? Yes. So therefore, don't delegate it to a higher level. Even if it's, right, even if it's that same idea, federalism, even if it's a great idea, we shouldn't teach any CRT. Well, that's nice, but freedom is more important, and the right thing will happen at a local level.
Any follow-up thoughts, David?
Yeah, this is where I think that Jeff and I's different views on this fall in, is I think that if you bring that down at too far of a local level, what you end up with is a great deal of inequality. You have people out in the Four Corners region of Utah, there's just not a lot of money out there. And the public system doesn't have the ability to provide the same kind of an education that they can get from a public school in Utah County. And so I think that the state of Utah, or a state in general, has an obligation to make sure that all of its citizens are educated equally. And so I think that if, there are that principle of pulling things down to a low level, it has some merit, but I think at the same time you have to think about, is that truly effective? Because you can pull things down to so low of a level that it ceases to be effective and ceases to provide an effective or in-depth education for everyone. And then who gets hurt on that in often cases are innocent individuals, children, who don't have the ability to make those kinds of choices and are then at the mercy of ineffective organizations or ineffective decision-making that's being made at a local level.
Thank you both. Here's another question from students in light of our discussion on education. Do you think there are certain homeschool situations that provide a good education, or do children have to go to a school institution to receive a valid education?
I think I'd answer that really simply, saying there's some great homeschool opportunities for people, and I don't think they need to go to a public school or a private school. But I've gone way more left, way more liberal in this, having been a teacher. And homeschooling is very effective, but it's also challenging. It's super hard to do, and it's super hard to do it right, in just my personal experience. I don't know if I call this a political position. It's more of just a personal preference position. I think it's super hard to get it right. And they're great. I tend to see this, basically. I tend to see homeschool as very polarized. Kids either come out of it super engaged, super curious, or they come out of it super unengaged and super not curious. I don't see a lot of the middle, usually. And so that's just a personal preference, really.
Thank you.
I think this is a hard one. I've seen really excellent homeschool curriculums and really excellent homeschool teachers, families that have done it very, very well. But I've also seen the other end of the spectrum as well, where it's just done really, really poorly. And to me, what it comes back down to is who's looking out for those who cannot look out for themselves. And so I do have a little bit of skepticism about homeschooling because of that lack of accountability, that lack of ensuring that people are getting the kind of education that they need. And although I think it's easier today with all the resources that are available with the internet and with great curriculums like what we have here at American Heritage, to do homeschooling effectively at different levels, I think that few people have the ability to effectively teach their children across the full range of knowledge that a person needs in order to prepare themselves to go to college.
So what would you suggest is the role of government? And this question's for both of you. Do you accept the status quo where there's not as much government control over what is being done at the homeschool level, or would you accept more government intervention in this case?
I would definitely accept more government intervention, especially if money or funding is being provided to families in order to do that education. Now, if government isn't involved in education at all, then I would be less in favor of that. But when government starts putting money into something, I think that they should have some degree of accountability for those who receive the money. This was the context that our debate was in a few months ago. But so what I would say is I think that the state does have an interest in making sure that the children of the state are educated to a certain, what I would say, minimum standard. Can they read? Can they do math? Do they know basic science? Do they know certain skills that they should know in order to successfully compete in our society? An educated society will be a free society. And I think that a lack of good education actually runs higher risks than at almost anything else, because you have the ability to lose freedom so quickly in a generation by generation basis. And I think that the state does have a serious interest in making sure that happens. So I would advocate for greater government involvement in homeschooling.
I don't think the government. The only way the government has a legitimate duty to educate kids is through the social contract theory. I don't think there's any natural law that says the government is in charge of educating the kids, and therefore I'd like to see government get out of it as much as possible. And I think that I always go back to this quote by Thomas Jefferson. He said, "I'd rather be exposed to the inconveniences attending too much liberty than the inconveniences attending too small a degree of it." And I think we've tricked ourselves into thinking, well, if government doesn't do it, it's not going to be done well. And I have a totally different opinion. If government does do it, they're not going to do it well. We need to have government not get in the way and let parents and the free flow of information and markets solve the problem. And so yeah, at a fundamental level, I say that I don't think government needs to get involved that way. But I can see your point of view.
So how do you view state constitutions, almost all of which have a requirement or a mandate on state governments in order to provide education for the citizen?
In terms of, do I like that that's there?
Well, I mean,
if I had my magic wand, yeah, I'd rather it not be there. I'd rather them not be in charge of that. I'd rather individual groups of parents get together and use best practices to hire a school board, which hires their teachers, which reports straight back to the parents. And that's a theory. We always have. I'm in theory. I'm like all these theoretical things. We're not there. We're way down, way away from that. But if I had my magic wand, yes, I would say don't do that. That's not the state's job. Is not to do that. It's not like parents going to be like, "Geez, what should I do with my kid?" Like the parents going to say, "I want to educate my kid. We're gonna hire a school board. We're gonna get together and build this school. We're gonna make this happen. We're gonna hold these teachers accountable to teach them to our standards." Instead of, "Well, I'm sure glad government's here, because if government didn't do it, I don't know who to educate my kids." Like, I just don't think that's going to happen. I think that's where we're at, and I think we've been there for hundreds of years. It's very unrealistic to even talk about my ideas because we're not there. I admit that.
Excellent. Thank you both. We'll do one more in line with the topic of education. And I think this one might stir the pot a little bit. Do you believe teachers' unions are a positive or negative influence on students and education in our country? Why? Jeff, you want to start?
Teachers unions? I feel like I like the free market. I like when people fight stuff out and try to get what they want. I think teachers unions get together and they try to fight things out. I think if people want to unite as a bigger voice, that's what does happen. You're never going to get anything done as a single person. And if you have similar ideas to other people, you should be free to unite and assemble. The First Amendment says freedom of assembly. You should get together and you should be able to do what you want to do to fight towards it. What I don't like about teachers unions or even labor unions, et cetera, is from my limited understanding of it, they're not just protected, they're actually kind of endorsed and favored and essentially subsidized, not necessarily monetarily, but through government intervention. I think that's a challenge when they do that. I think from the most part, teachers unions lean fairly left, fairly liberal. And so a lot of their individual ideas I don't agree with because I don't like the left agenda or the left perspective. But I think they say 70 to 80% of all teachers are liberal. That's just how that's where for some reason they gravitate towards the education field. And so for that reason, I tend to have a sour taste in my mouth for unions because it typically means liberal ideas and liberal agendas. But I'm very much against them getting preferential treatment because they're a union. If someone wants to get together, if I want to form a union of conservative teachers or a union of conservative parents, more power to us. I don't think we should ever shut people down from doing that. I just don't think we should favor them and incentivize them to do so.
Are you at all, I guess, opposed or uncomfortable, with the fact that teachers' unions exercise a pretty high degree of control in American politics, right? I mean, all of those union dues from teachers inevitably end up in the coffers, as noted in the Democrat Party, right? In supporting various candidates who then come back and support those teachers' unions, right? At the same time, teachers' unions have, at least recently, been criticized largely for essentially keeping kids out of the schools during the pandemic for a significantly longer period of time. I mean, that's the power that they have and were able to exercise, essentially keeping public schools closed, which had relatively poor outcomes on students for those years during the pandemic. Do you have any thoughts on some of those criticisms that are made against teachers' unions?
There's some areas that I haven't dived into very well, and this is one of them. My initial response is, look, if they want, kind of a repeat of what I just said before, I don't like what they do because they typically lean left, and which is evidenced by some of the things they do. But in general, I don't really have anything against the idea of people unionizing, getting together and trying to get their ideas pushed through. And in some ways, I think a conservative could admit, well, we don't have a very good tool to fight back against them. And I'd say, first of all, it's because the nature of constitutions that demand public education, that puts us behind the 8 ball. But secondly, because we don't have a very well-organized parent group. And if we had a national parents union, and government does go to those who show up. And in the education field, liberals are showing up and they're winning. And so if we want to change that, we need to have conservatives show up. What American Heritage does is says we don't even play in the game. We just do a private school, and that's another option that I think is a good option. But yeah, I don't like the results, but I can't argue against what they're doing. I don't think because anybody can organize and have their voice heard.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, so I think that my opinion on this is fairly nuanced. Full disclosure, my wife is a public school teacher, and she does belong to a teachers union. I've represented unions. I think that unions are generally positive. There's a lot of things in American history and whatnot that have come about because of unions that are very helpful. I think that for me it comes down to an issue of state law. What do state laws allow? Some states don't allow public employees to unionize. And as a result of that, they don't have that right. And in those kinds of states, what I've seen is that people who belong to who are public employees tend to lose out on the power that people who are in the private sector are able to engage in and are able to enjoy that First Amendment right, so to speak. And so I believe that teachers should have as much of a right to unionize and to bargain collectively as any other group does. So that's my basic fundamental stance on it. I think that it is a little nuanced, though, based off of whatever the state laws are. I think the hard thing comes is when you see unions pushing agendas that you don't necessarily agree with. And my wife's union, they don't always push the kinds of things that she agrees with. And that's where I believe in representative government. And so if she is unhappy with her union's positions, then she has a couple of choices to make. She can withdraw from the union. She can become more involved in the union. She can try to advocate for different positions, points of views, run as a union rep. I mean, so there's all kinds of levels of activity that allow her to be more engaged, or allow teachers or public employees to be more engaged. I do think that the fundamental issue is that in the United States, that left-leaning individuals have gone into education, and I think that right-leaning individuals have abandoned education. And as a result of that, the vast majority of educators in the United States are left-leaning. And so what I say is this is one of those ones where I kind of point the finger at myself, but this is one of the reasons why I became a teacher, is because if we want to make a difference, then we have to get involved. And
Are you saying you're right wing?
did I didn't say that.
I just want to clarify.
But, especially where I came from, I viewed myself as more right-wing. Here, I'm not so sure, but...
You came from the Socialist Republic of California.
Yeah, Southern California, the Socialist Republic of California, that's right. So, I think that it's something that it's important for people to get involved. I think this is something Jeff and I both agree with. It's the people who speak up, who get involved, is who dictate the agenda. And so long as we're feeling that we're not getting the results we want out of our government, whether it's local, state, or federal, we need to be more involved.
Excellent. Just one more question, I guess, in relation to education. I think this question that doesn't necessarily connect with social contract theory or natural rights, but there is some interest among students to know your views on how high school students, or how should high school students be allowed to use ChatGPT? Do you have concerns, if any, about AI technology in education? This will be our final education question.
You want me to start, or you want Jeff to go?
I'll start. I use ChatGPT all the time. It's awesome. It's very, very good, and it's an awesome tool that can teach you a lot more pointed. It's incredible. It's incredible. The stuff you can type in there and get out of it, it's amazing. I think it's a great tool that kids need to use and should logically use, and so we need to figure out a way to make it so it's a helpful tool. So in terms of writing essays, etc., I think, well, you just have them write the essay on the piece of paper. There's no way they can use ChatGPT because they just have a piece of paper in front of them. In terms of research, in terms of gathering thoughts, in terms of getting their mind around reasoned principles and relating, I just don't know why that'd be bad to go to ChatGPT to figure out, oh, okay, get that, and to kind of help them to get information they need. That being said, a true education is not the end product. It's not the paper. The true education, what happens in your heart and brain as you process things, and you can never have ChatGPT do that for you. And so ChatGPT has its role, and it's a big. We're going to talk about it. I would be talking about it with you if I were here all summer. It's an incredibly awesome tool. Comes with many complex issues. But I think to say that they shouldn't use it, I think is fairly naive in my view. But I also think to think that there's no way to control it is fairly naive also. So it's just going to take a lot of work.
I don't use artificial intelligence all the time. It's because
There's a little bit of wiggle room right
there was a little bit.
Just gonna.
But I think that Jeff and I think agree. We've actually had a lot of conversations about this, and I think that ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, it's not going anywhere. It's here to stay, and so as a society, we have to learn how to deal with it. When I was a kid in school, I know this is a long time ago, but we used to do research by going to the little card catalog and pulling out the drawer and fingering through the cards, and now we use search engines, and nobody thinks twice about that. Nobody thinks that that's somehow unethical to use a search engine. Where I think the difficulty with using a tool like ChatGPT is where it's being used what I call unethically. When you rely upon a tool to do your thinking for you or to present a position for you, the only ethical thing to do is to acknowledge that that's where the information came from. And so I think that students need to be taught how to teach this, or how to use this tool correctly, how to use it ethically, and how to use it as something to assist them in truly learning, not doing work for them. And I think that's kind of the key in my mind is you can't farm out your thinking to a machine. But computer programs, software, artificial intelligence can be very helpful in developing the information and analyzing the information. But at the end of the day, it's an individual. It's a person who has to make those kinds of choices and who makes those kinds of thoughts. And so I think that it's a very powerful tool. But like all things, when there's great power, there needs to be great responsibility. And so I think the key is figuring out how do we use this thing responsibly. And it's going to be a real challenge. The problem is this thing is developing so fast and it's come upon us so quickly that I think a lot of us have been caught flat-footed thinking, well, how do we respond to this? How do we deal with this? It's just come on so suddenly, and what it's able to do and how quickly it's able to evolve and develop. We just don't know where it's going. But we need to make sure that as educators and as individuals that we're looking at artificial intelligence in responsible ways and using it as a tool. I would never want my tools to do things by themselves. I always want to direct my tools for what I want them to do.
Excellent. Thank you both. We're going to switch gears here to gun control. Why do you think the U.S. experiences the most mass shootings in the world? What to you is the best option for addressing the influx of public/school mass shootings in the United States?
I'll take a shot at this one first. That was terrible. I know, that just went right over to a lot of people's heads there. I know some of you are still thinking, what? I don't know. I think my personal opinion is that the reason that we have so many mass shootings in the United States is because we have so many guns in the United States. I think that the prevalence of firearms in the United States make the ability to have those kinds of events very, very likely. Now, when you look, though, at the level of violence in the United States over, say, the last 50 years, there has been a steady decline in violence in the United States. I think that the media has driven this idea that violence is so much more now than when I was a child. And it's not. It's actually significantly less. But I do think that we have so much more of it because of the availability and the ready access to firearms.
And I'd say, I think gun violence, unquestionably comes from the breakdown of the family. I think that's the real challenge. I think the breakdown of the family is very much tied to the overreach of government. And so I think in terms of practical means, practically speaking, I don't know why I shouldn't have a gun in my drawer at school that's locked. And if somebody comes in my room and starts shooting, I shoot them before they shoot all 30 students. I think that just seems like a simple thing to fix. I can see how there'd be some challenges to that. I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any silver bullet, but I stopped. I don't think there's any like magic wand that you can fix. There's some challenges that come with that for sure, but that's, I don't know, that's what I see. You see the most effective mass shootings have been in gun-free zones because people aren't idiots. If they want to go do some mass shooting, they go to a place where no one's allowed to have guns. They don't have anyone to fight back. And I think that if you had more concealed carries on campus, if you had trained individuals, I think that I think no matter how much you try to limit the amount of guns, that's never gonna work. The more that you limit guns, all you do is make it so that people who follow the rules don't have guns, and people who don't follow the rules do have guns, and there's more sitting ducks. And I think history teaches that. Hitler, Pol Pot, Mao Zedong, all these historical figures, they were smart. They said, let me take your guns and protect you, and then they were in charge of murdering 10 million people at a time in their respective countries. So I would say, but really, in terms of long-term real fixes, it has to be the family. There's a breakdown in the family. There's a breakdown in respect for life, a breakdown in respect for family, for authority, and all those things I think are perpetuated by government to unnecessarily meddles in trying to cause solutions to problems that they caused, which requires more solutions to problems that they cause, which requires more solutions from problems they cause. And it's just this thing where they have to get more and more. And if they just step back a little bit and let people own their freedom and own their consequence, I think that would help a lot.
I think this is a place where the roles that Jeff and I usually have are a little bit reversed. More normally, Jeff's more on the ideal side, saying that we're way down that road too far. This is one where I'm more on the ideal side. I acknowledge we're way too far down that road. There are some 350, 400 million guns in the United States. It would be almost impossible to try to in any way effectively to reduce those. But and I don't think that there is an effective way to do that right now, especially in light of the Second Amendment, which I think means exactly what it says. And so, but what I would like to see personally in my hypothetical, idealistic world would be that the Second Amendment would be repealed, and that there wouldn't be the kind of access to guns that there is today.
Would you support a federal ban on assault rifles if one were to be passed by Congress in response to a potential school shooting?
So, under the current Constitution of the United States, I would say no. Assault rifle bans inevitably are based off of cosmetics, not off of reality. I think the Second Amendment means what it says, that citizens have the right to bear arms, and I think that my views are actually on what the Second Amendment says are probably even a little more expansive than Jeff's. But I think that policy is an outdated policy, but I think that it should be rolled back. But no, I think that an assault weapons ban by Congress would be or should be unconstitutional, because the Second Amendment is a very straightforward, explicit right.
And that's why you'd like to amend it, because it's too.
That's right.
It's too granting, in your opinion, to gun ownership.
In fact, I believe that the right to bear arms is far more expansive than that, because that's what the Second Amendment says, and so people have the right to have a large array of arms, which I think are illegal under current law. And I think that most of those are contrary to the express language of the Second Amendment. So I would like to see the Second Amendment rolled back, where we can then kind of address these issues. But it can only be done through a constitutional amendment, not through the kind of whittling away and the peck at things, trying to avoid, to erode those rights the way that Congress often does.
Yeah, and I think the Second Amendment is just in line with natural rights, natural right theory, natural law theory. The idea that it's my natural right to defend myself. It's not government's right, and so therefore government should never cross my ability to defend myself.
Excellent. Switching gears to the issue or to the topic of war, do you support the war in Ukraine? Why or why not?
Sure, I'll take a shot at that. I do support the war in Ukraine. I think there's a number of reasons why the war in Ukraine is something that the United States should support. And first off, Ukraine was invaded, Russia being the aggressor in those circumstances. And I think the United States should and could play a larger and a more significant role in that war than it currently does. And I think that the United States, as one of the most, if not the most powerful nation in the entire world, has a certain obligation in order to help keep the world safe. And when you look at history and you see that large countries picking on small countries, taking them over, invading them, and doing things, that's oftentimes the beginning of an erosion of power. And I think when you look at the last 2 years and with Russia's invasion of Ukraine and with some of the aggression that China is doing, that what you see is the ability and the safety of U.S. citizens as well as people in the world at large are less secure than they were 2 years ago. And I think that the United States has an obligation, a moral obligation, in order to protect and to guarantee some of that safety. Jeff?
Yeah, I have a pretty unpopular opinion about this. Like I said at the beginning, I'm pretty much anti-war all the time, and I would hold that same opinion in this area. Not because I can answer all the questions related to my stance, but because I think in the end, as much as America has claimed to create a safer world, when you look at the results of Korea and Vietnam and Afghanistan and Iraq, you look at all the different things that gone on. I'm not totally sure that has been the result. I think it's easy for history to say that. I think it's easy for that to be interpreted that way. But in some ways, we've never tried not having America solve everyone's problems. And I'd like to see people solve their own problems. Does that mean people will die in the process? Yes. But people are dying in the process of war as well. And I'm not sure that war is as clear-cut and that the results are as good as we want. I mean, in many ways, in many countries, many ethnicities, all kinds of, America has bought the best enemies money can buy by their actions. As one example, when we armed the Afghanis against the Russians because it felt like it was our job to do so. Russia's the big dog. They're invading Afghanistan. What happens in Afghanistan? We give them millions of dollars of stuff, of weaponry, of money, of funds, etc. And because we go in there and kind of demand what happens, then the Afghanis, they turn around to be the Taliban, and the Taliban is now wreaking havoc or has wreaked havoc on us. And I think there's some natural consequences when you John Quincy Adams, my students will know this quote, but John Quincy Adams says we should not go in search of monsters to destroy. And when you do, you find yourself involved in countries' problems upon countries' problems to the point where you can't extricate yourself from those problems. And I think you essentially sign up for perpetual war. And as much as I hate war, I don't think the way to stop that is to be involved in other people's wars. And I feel super bad about that. But when I'm as I bring it out to a very personal level, if two people are having an argument, is it my job to go in there and tell them who's right and who's wrong? Because the fact of the matter is, even though I walked in and person A punched person B in the face, it's clear that shouldn't have happened and person A is bigger than B. Well, I don't know what happened a minute before that. What if B shot his mom? Or, whoa, why am I the one to say, look, I'm the decider here. Here's what needs to go on.
It's Mother's Day in a few days, Jeff.
What's that?
It's Mother's Day.
Oh, Mother's Day. That was totally.
This is why
appropriate.
gun control is necessary.
So anyway, I just think that too often America plays the big dog and plays the almighty knower of what should happen and shouldn't happen. If you think about what happened in Puerto Rico or Guam or Hawaii or all these different places, I think in some ways we've justified our actions and said that what we did was right because we are who we are, and I just get a little bit nervous about that. A lot nervous about that.
So just as a follow-up for both of your thoughts, one of the criticisms of the war in Ukraine is that, Ukraine hasn't quite been honest about how the funds we've allocated to them have been used, right? And as we've learned from previous wars like World War I, World War II, that essentially Western European countries or the United States or the Nazis basically become propaganda machines where they have to convince their people via messaging for the justifiability of the war that they're involved in. So how much can we believe the narratives coming out of Ukraine or Russia or from even our own government regarding what actually is happening over in the Ukraine?
That's what I consider to be one of the biggest problems. Is it's not our fight, and we don't know. None of us know. None of us have any idea what's going on with Russia, in my opinion, with Russia and Ukraine. Unless we've lived there, unless we have ancestors there, unless we've studied the last 250 years, maybe the last 2,500 years, what's going on there, the conflict, the all that stuff. And so if it's not my battle, it's certainly not my job to create and to hand over money and to propagandize people to believe what I think should happen. It's just not my fight. As much as that's sad and people are going to die, I just think we can't forget that people are dying already in war, and there's some ugly things and ugly people out there, but it's not our job to fix all those problems, not because we don't care, but because we understand our proper role, and it's not our role to go in search of monsters to destroy.
So, from my perspective, I think what the issue is that just handing money over to people is a bad way to create security and defense. So I agree that the situation in Ukraine is unclear. However, it's more transparent in Ukraine than it is in Russia. And we do have a presence in Ukraine. There are reporters in Ukraine who can report in a free and open way. That's not necessarily the case in Russia. And my criticism of the way that the war in Ukraine has been handled from the U.S. perspective is that the United States hasn't been involved enough. And the grant of money and just say, well, here's some money, and just throw money at a problem, I don't think is the way that you provide security. And I don't think that it's the United States' problem to go in and punish, but I do think that the United States does have a role to play in the world of just trying to stop hostilities. And that's a place where I think that the U.S. could say, look, this is Russia, you need to pull back beyond this line. And I think that the Biden administration made a mistake in how slow they were to ramp up economic sanctions and their refusal to provide other kinds of help and aid to Ukrainian forces or to encourage other Western European allies in order to do the same. So,
Excellent, thank you. Just looking at the time, we still have several issues that we're going to address, including the digitalization of the U.S. dollar, as well as the looming default on the U.S. debt, and the firing of Tucker Carlson. But before we get to that, we're just going to take a 5-minute stretch break. So for those of you in the live audience, if you need time to go and stretch out a little bit and get blood moving, we're going to come back here in 5 minutes for the remainder of our debate.
What do you think? I think if we hit whatever. Yeah. They're juicy. They're juicy.
Okay, folks, we're going to get started again. We still have another 20 minutes left of debate. If we can just do a round of applause to invite those still out in the lobby to come back in. Thank you. Okay, as promised, we're just going to touch on a couple of questions regarding the economy. Do you support the possible digitalization of the U.S. dollar, where all transactions pass from a buyer's digital dollar account through the Federal Reserve to the seller's digital dollar account? In other words, do you support the possibility of a cashless society?
Just to be clear, these questions are by students, right?
This is not my question. I did throw in one of those previously. I
I could sense which one was yours.
Which one? The teachers union?
Yeah.
Education,
Okay,
yeah.
I did throw that one in there. So this one is actually a combination of a student question and a question from a parent.
Oh, cool.
So I could put them together.
Cool.
Yep.
I'll start. I don't like the Federal Reserve. I think the Federal Reserve is kind of the head of the beast. Like, if we cut that thing off, we'd be in a lot better situation. So to digitize currency, puts more power in bureaucrats, right, in government. And I think that where we're at is very problematic, because inflating the dollar, just printing a bunch more money, in theory printing, you're really just digitizing, you're just making it out of on spreadsheets essentially. I think that's our problem, not our solutions. I would say to digitize currency and to put more of a centralized power in monetary and fiscal policy into the government, and to have them manage all those transactions, I think is not the solution to the problem. It is the problem. So it'd be counterintuitive to do that. It would be counterproductive to do that.
I think for all intents and purposes, we're on a digital economy. So, I mean, I don't remember the last time I paid cash for anything. So it's I don't know what the statistics are, but I suspect that 99% of all transactions from a dollar standpoint